The water cascades down the storm drain in torrents, and Karen's face turns crimson with rage as she screams into her phone, "They're destroying my property!" But when the police arrive and the property deeds come out, her world implodes in ways she never saw coming. Because sometimes the person you're trying to destroy owns everything you thought was yours. The industrial pump roared to life at exactly 6 a.m., its mechanical heartbeat echoing off the pristine walls of the Maplewood subdivision. Marcus Chen adjusted his safety goggles and watched the crystal-clear water begin its exodus from the Olympic-sized swimming pool, swirling down into the specialized drainage system he'd spent 3 days installing. "Marcus! Marcus!" The shriek cut through the morning air like a buzzsaw through silk. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He didn't need to turn around to know that Karen Whitmore was barreling across the manicured lawn in her terry-cloth robe and designer slippers, her blonde highlights catching the early morning sun like spun gold dipped in fury. For 18 months, she'd made his life a living hell, and today, finally, the tables were about to turn. "Morning, Karen," Marcus called over the pump's roar, not bothering to look up from his pressure gauges. "Beautiful day for some pool maintenance, don't you think?" Karen's face had progressed from its usual entitled pink to a deeper shade of outrage. She planted herself at the edge of what she considered her backyard, hands on her hips, looking like a suburban warrior ready for battle. "You cannot drain my pool without my permission. This is private property theft. Destruction of property. I'm calling the police right now." Marcus finally turned to face her, his expression maddeningly calm. "Go ahead. I'll wait." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. In all their confrontations, the noise complaints, the property line disputes, the homeowners association meetings where she'd tried to have him fined for everything from his work trucks to his inappropriate lawn gnomes, he'd never been this confident, this settled. "You'll wait?" she sputtered. "You'll wait! Do you have any idea what you've just done? This pool cost me $40,000. The landscaping around it was another $15,000. You've just destroyed $55,000 of my investment." Marcus wiped his hands on a clean rag, taking his time. Behind Karen, he could see the other neighbors beginning to emerge from their houses. Mrs. Rodriguez from 247 clutching her morning coffee, the Peterson twins from 251 recording everything on their phones, old Mr. Hassan from 245 already settling into his lawn chair like he was expecting dinner and a show. "Your investment," Marcus repeated thoughtfully. "That's interesting phrasing." Something in his tone made Karen's eyes narrow. She'd learned to read the subtle shifts in her neighbors' moods over the years. It was a survival skill in a subdivision, where perception was everything and gossip traveled faster than kudzu. But this was different. This was dangerous. "Of course it's my investment. This is my backyard, my pool, my property." She jabbed her finger toward the rapidly emptying pool. "And you're trespassing." "Actually," Marcus said, reaching into his back pocket and pulling out a folded manila envelope, "that's where you're wrong." The envelope was thick, official-looking, and Karen's eyes fixed on it like a mouse watching a snake. Around them, the neighborhood had gone quiet except for the steady drone of the pump and the gurgle of water finding its way to freedom. "What is that?" Karen's voice had lost some of its fire. Marcus unfolded the documents with deliberate care, like a magician preparing his greatest trick. "Well, Karen, since you're so concerned about property ownership, I thought you might like to see the actual deed to this land." "The deed?" Karen laughed, but it sounded forced. "I have the deed. I've lived here for 8 years. I know exactly where my property lines are." "Do you?" Marcus held up the first page. "Because according to the county surveyor's office, the original platting of this subdivision in 1987 shows something very different from what you think you know." The color began to drain from Karen's face as efficiently as the water was draining from the pool. "That's impossible. I had a survey done when I bought the house." you had a survey done, Marcus agreed. But you never had it registered with the county, and you never bothered to check it against the original plat maps. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the official seals and stamps on the documents. Would you like to know what those original maps show? Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Around them, the gathered neighbors leaned in, sensing that something momentous was happening. Mrs. Rodriguez had been joined by her husband. The Peterson twins had called their mother out. Even the usually reclusive family from 249 had appeared on their front porch. The original survey, Marcus continued, his voice carrying clearly across the morning air, shows that your backyard extends exactly 47 feet from your back door. Everything beyond that, including the land your pool sits on, your gazebo, your fire pit, and your prize-winning rose garden, sits on what was originally designated as common area green space. That's insane, Karen's voice cracked. The developer wouldn't have let me build a pool on common land. Marcus nodded sympathetically. You're right. Thornfield Development wouldn't have allowed that, which is why, in 1988, they sold that particular parcel of common land to a private buyer. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Would you like to guess who that private buyer was? The silence stretched taut as a piano wire. Karen's breathing had become shallow and rapid. Behind her, Mr. Peterson whispered something to his wife, who immediately pulled out her phone. The buyer, Marcus said, was a young Army Corps of Engineers lieutenant named David Chen, my grandfather. He held up another document. He bought it with his military savings because he dreamed of building a house here someday. He held on to the land for 43 years, paying taxes on it, maintaining it, waiting for the right time. Karen's legs seemed to wobble. Your grandfather? My grandfather who died 3 years ago and left the land to me. The same land you've been living on, building on, and claiming as your own for 8 years. Marcus's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath now. The same land you've been trespassing on every single day since you moved in. The implications hit the gathered crowd like a tsunami. Mrs. Rodriguez actually gasped. The Peterson twins dropped his phone. Mr. Hassan leaned forward so far in his lawn chair that it creaked ominously. But I have a deed. Karen's voice was barely above a whisper now. You have a deed to your house, and the 47 feet behind it, Marcus confirmed. Everything else, well, congratulations. You've been the world's most expensive squatter. Karen's face had gone from red to white to a sickly green. This can't be legal. There are laws about this kind of thing. Adverse possession. I've been maintaining this land for years. 7 years in Georgia, Marcus said helpfully. You need 7 years of continuous open and notorious possession. You've been here 8, which would normally be enough, except for one tiny problem. He smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Adverse possession doesn't work when the true owner has been paying taxes on the land the entire time. He pulled out another document, tax records going back decades, showing continuous payments on the parcel, first by David Chen and, for the last 3 years, by Marcus himself. Every year, Marcus said, every single year, my grandfather paid taxes on this land, and when he died, I kept paying them. Which means, legally speaking, there was never any question about ownership. He gestured toward the draining pool. I own this land, Karen. I own your pool. I own your gazebo. I own your rose garden. I own everything you've built here. Karen sank onto her knees in the grass that she now realized wasn't hers. Around them, the neighbors murmured among themselves, phones clicking as they captured every moment of her humiliation. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this now? Marcus looked down at her, and for a moment, his expression softened. Because for 18 months you've made my life hell. You've called code enforcement on me 14 times for violations I didn't commit. You've sicked the homeowners association on me for infractions that don't exist. You've called the police on my work crews, my family gatherings, and my barbecues." His voice hardened again. "You cost me a $20,000 contract when you convinced the Hendersons I was unreliable and unprofessional. You've spread rumors about my business, my character, and my right to live in this neighborhood." Karen's eyes filled with tears, but Marcus wasn't finished. "And last month," he said, "when my 8-year-old nephew was visiting and accidentally kicked his ball onto what you claimed was your property, you screamed at him for 10 minutes and threatened to call child services on my sister for letting her brat run wild." The crowd's murmur turned ugly. Everyone knew how much Marcus loved his family, especially his sister's kids. "He cried for 2 hours, Karen. An 8-year-old boy cried for 2 hours because a grown woman screamed at him for retrieving his ball." Marcus's jaw tightened. "That was your mistake. That was the moment you crossed a line you can't uncross." Karen looked up at him through her tears. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Marcus cut her off. "And now it's time for consequences." The pool was nearly empty now. Reveal. Karen's hands shook as she poured her third cup of coffee at 11 a.m., the ceramic mug rattling against the granite countertop that had once been her pride and joy. Through her kitchen window, she could see Marcus methodically cleaning his equipment, moving with the calm efficiency of a man who had just executed a perfect plan. The documents scattered across her dining room table told a story she didn't want to believe. Property deeds, survey maps, tax records. She'd spent the last 3 hours calling every lawyer, surveyor, and real estate agent in her phone, desperate for someone to tell her that Marcus was wrong. They couldn't. Mrs. Whitmore, her real estate agent, Janet, sounded tired over the phone. "I've reviewed everything you sent me, and I have to be honest, this looks legitimate. The original plat maps are public record. And if Mr. Chen's grandfather really did purchase that parcel in 1988. But how is this possible?" Karen's voice cracked. "How did nobody know? How did the previous owners sell me a house with land that wasn't theirs?" That's a very good question," Janet admitted. "One that's probably going to require some serious legal investigation. Have you called Tom Bradley yet?" Tom Bradley was Karen's lawyer, the same one who'd handled her divorce 5 years ago. She'd been putting off that call, partly because she knew what he'd tell her, and partly because legal fees were already dancing in her head like sugar plum nightmares. "I'll call him now," Karen said, then paused. "Janet, how bad is this? Really?" The silence stretched long enough for Karen to hear her own heartbeat. "Karen, honey, if what this man is saying is true, then you've been living on someone else's property for 8 years. Best case scenario, you work out some kind of lease arrangement. Worst case," Janet trailed off. "Worst case what?" "Worst case? You could lose everything you've invested in that backyard and potentially face a lawsuit for illegal use of someone else's land." Karen ended the call and immediately dialed her lawyer. Tom Bradley had always been direct with her, sometimes brutally so, but she needed that honesty now. "Karen?" Tom's gravelly voice came through the phone like a judge delivering a sentence. "I've been expecting your call." "You've been—" "How could you be expecting my call?" "Because Marcus Chen called me 2 hours ago." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She sank into her dining room chair, staring at the documents spread before her like evidence at a crime scene. "He called you? My lawyer?" "He's not poaching if that's what you're worried about," Tom said dryly. "He called to give me a professional courtesy heads up about the situation. Apparently, he wanted to make sure you had legal representation before things escalated." "How thoughtful of him," Karen said bitterly. "Actually, it was thoughtful. Most people in his position would have just served you with papers and let you figure it out yourself." Tom's tone was serious now. "Karen, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Based on what Mr. Chen shared with me and the documents I've—" Had a chance to review, you are in significant legal jeopardy. But I've been paying a mortgage on this property for 8 years. You've been paying a mortgage on your house and the land it legally sits on, Tom corrected. The bank that holds your mortgage has a lien on property you actually own. Everything else is someone else's property that you've been using without permission. Karen felt the room spinning around her. What about adverse possession? I've been here for 8 years. I've maintained the land, improved it. Adverse possession requires that the true owner abandon the property or fail to pay taxes on it, Tom interrupted. Mr. Chen's family has been paying taxes on that land continuously for 37 years. There's no abandonment claim to be made. So what are my options? Tom was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, your best option is to apologize for whatever you did to piss this guy off and hope he's willing to negotiate a reasonable lease arrangement. Lease arrangement? Karen repeated numbly. Karen, what did you do to this man? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Karen closed, her eyes running through 18 months of complaints, confrontations, and carefully orchestrated harassment. She'd been so sure she was in the right, so convinced that Marcus was the problem neighbor who didn't belong in their upscale subdivision. I may have made some complaints about his business operations. What kind of complaints? Karen's throat felt dry. Code enforcement, homeowners association violations, noise complaints. How many complaints? I don't know exactly. Karen. Tom's voice carried the weight of 20 years of legal practice. How many complaints? Maybe 14 or 15. Jesus Christ, Karen. Tom was quiet for a long moment. What else? I may have influenced some potential clients to choose other contractors. You interfered with his business? I just shared my concerns about having construction crews in a residential neighborhood. Karen, what else? The kitchen felt smaller now, the walls pressing in around her. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Rodriguez talking animatedly to her husband, both of them gesturing toward Karen's empty pool. There was an incident with his nephew, she admitted quietly. What kind of incident? The boy kicked a ball onto my property. I told him to stay off my land. How did you tell him? Karen closed her eyes. I may have raised my voice. You screamed at an 8-year-old child. It wasn't a question. He was trespassing on land that, as it turns out, wasn't yours to begin with. Tom's voice had gone cold. Karen, you need to understand something. Marcus Chen isn't some random neighbor with a property dispute. I did some checking after he called. He's a licensed professional engineer with his own construction company. He has an impeccable reputation in the industry, and more importantly, he has resources. What kind of resources? The kind that can make your life very expensive if you push this wrong. Tom paused. He also has a paper trail showing 18 months of harassment from you, documented interference with his business, and now video evidence of you screaming at his 8-year-old nephew. Karen felt her stomach drop. Video evidence? The Peterson twins, Karen. They recorded everything. It's already been shared around the neighborhood, and knowing teenagers, it's probably online by now. The implications hit her in waves. Her interior design business depended on referrals and reputation. Videos of her screaming at a child would be career-ending. What do you recommend? She asked weakly. I recommend you swallow your pride, call Marcus Chen, and beg his forgiveness. Tom's voice was matter-of-fact. Then I recommend you negotiate the most favorable lease arrangement you can and hope he doesn't decide to pursue damages for the business you cost him. Damages? Karen, if he can prove that your harassment cost him contracts, he can sue you for lost income. Given that you admitted to influencing potential clients. Tom let the implications sink in. We could be talking about tens of thousands of dollars. Karen stared at the empty pool through her window. $40,000 to build, $47,000 to remove, and now potentially tens of thousands more in damages. The numbers swirled in her head like water down a drain. "There's something else," Tom continued. "Something Mr. Chen mentioned that you might want to know about." "What now?" "He said he's been documenting everything for 3 years. Everything, Karen. Photos, videos, audio recordings, copies of every complaint you filed. He's built a comprehensive case file showing a pattern of harassment and intimidation." Karen's blood ran cold. That's stalking." "No, that's legal preparation, and it suggests that this morning's revelation wasn't impulsive. This was planned." Tom's voice carried a warning. "Karen, you picked a fight with someone who was already 10 steps ahead of you." The doorbell rang, making Karen jump. Through the front window, she could see a police cruiser in her driveway. "Tom, the police are here. Did you call them?" "No, Oh, God. This morning I threatened to call the police on Marcus. He told me to go ahead." "And now they're at your door instead of his," Tom said grimly. "Karen, do not say anything to the police without me present. Do you understand? Not one word." Karen walked to the front door on unsteady legs. Through the peephole, she could see Officer Martinez, the same cop who'd responded to 3 of her noise complaints against Marcus over the past year. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Officer Martinez's voice was polite but formal. "We received a call about a possible property dispute. May we come in?" I need to call my lawyer." "That's certainly your right, ma'am. But we're just here to get information. Mr. Chen filed a report about possible trespassing and property damage, and we need to hear both sides of the story." Karen's hand froze on the door handle. "Property damage?" "According to Mr. Chen's report, you've constructed several permanent structures on his property without permission. That could constitute criminal property damage under Georgia law." The world tilted sideways. Criminal charges, police reports, everything she'd built, not just physically, but professionally and socially, crashing down around her. "I need my lawyer," she repeated. "Of course, ma'am. But I should let you know that Mr. Chen has requested that we take photographs of the current state of his property, document the structures that have been built, and file an initial report. Whether you speak with us or not, that's going to happen." Through her kitchen window, Karen could see Marcus stand. By 2 p.m., Karen's living room had transformed into a war room of legal documents, laptops, and empty coffee cups. Tom Bradley sat across from her, his weathered face grave as he reviewed the police report that Officer Martinez had left behind. "Criminal trespassing, unlawful construction on private property, and interference with business operations," Tom read aloud. "Karen, these aren't civil matters anymore. These are criminal charges." "But I didn't know," Karen's voice carried a desperate edge. "How can I be charged with trespassing on land I thought was mine?" "Intent doesn't matter in property law," Tom said grimly. "What matters is that you built permanent structures on someone else's land without permission, and you've been operating a business on that same property." He looked up from the papers. "Did you really charge Mrs. Patterson $3,000 for a consultation that took place in your sunroom?" Karen's face flushed. "That was a full design package, not just a consultation." "Karen," Tom's voice cut through her protest. "Your sunroom sits 12 feet onto Marcus Chen's property. Every business meeting you held there, every payment you received, every contract you signed, all of it happened on his land without his permission." He pulled out a calculator. "How many clients have you met with in that room over the past 3 years?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Karen mentally counted. The Pattersons, the Hendersons, the Williams family, the Kowalskis, at least a dozen others. Maybe 15? 20? At an average of what per consultation? "It depends on the scope, but maybe $2,500 per project on average." Tom punched numbers into his calculator, then showed her the display. $62,500 in revenue generated on someone else's property. Karen, that's not just trespassing anymore. That's commercial use without a license. That's potential tax fraud if you didn't properly declare the business use of property you don't own. Karen stared at the number until it blurred. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built since her divorce, it was all crashing down because she'd been too arrogant to check a property survey. The doorbell rang again, making both of them look up. Through the window, Karen could see a woman in a business suit holding a tablet and a manila folder. "Are you expecting someone?" Tom asked. Karen shook her head, walking to the door with the dread of someone approaching their own execution. The woman on her porch was young, professional, and wearing the kind of smile that real estate agents used when delivering bad news. "Mrs. Whitmore? I'm Jessica Chan from Chen Properties." The woman's voice was polite but businesslike. "I represent Marcus Chen in all matters related to his real estate holdings." Karen's heart stopped. "Chen Properties? Mr. Chen asked me to deliver this personally." Jessica held out the manila folder. "It's a formal notice regarding the unauthorized use of his property, along with a proposed resolution that might help us avoid more serious legal action." Tom appeared at Karen's shoulder. "I'm Mrs. Whitmore's attorney, Tom Bradley." "Excellent." Jessica's smile never wavered. "Then you'll want to review these documents carefully. Mr. Chen is prepared to offer Mrs. Whitmore a way out of this situation, but the offer has some time-sensitive conditions." Karen opened the folder with trembling hands. The first document was printed on official letterhead. "Notice to quit and demand for possession of real property." "He's evicting me?" Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "He's evicting you from his property," Jessica corrected gently. "The structures you've built, the land you've been using, all of it needs to be returned to its original condition within 30 days, or Mr. Chen will pursue legal action for unlawful detainer." Tom took the documents and scanned them quickly, his frown deepening with each page. "This is comprehensive." "Mr. Chen is very thorough," Jessica agreed. "However, he's also reasonable. If you look at page 3, you'll see his proposed alternative arrangement." Karen flipped to page 3, her eyes scanning the dense legal text. The words swam together, but certain phrases jumped out at her. "Monthly lease payment of $2,400. Immediate cessation of all harassment. Formal written apology. Business license restrictions." $2,400 a month? Karen's voice cracked. "That's the fair market rate for the land you've been using," Jessica explained. "Mr. Chen had it appraised by 3 independent firms. Given the size of the parcel and the improvements you've made, it's actually quite reasonable." "Reasonable?" Karen laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "I can't afford $2,400 a month. My mortgage is already $1,800. "Then perhaps," Jessica said carefully, "you might want to consider Mr. Chen's second option." Tom found the second option on page 5 and read it aloud. "Complete removal of all unauthorized structures within 60 days, restoration of property to original condition at owner's expense, payment of damages for unauthorized commercial use, and formal agreement never to trespass on subject property again." "What kind of damages?" Karen asked weakly. Jessica consulted her tablet. "Based on the commercial use of the property over the past 3 years, plus the cost of having the land surveyed and legally documented, plus administrative costs for dealing with 18 months of harassment, approximately $47,000. The same number that had been haunting Karen all morning. It was like the universe had decided on a specific price for her downfall. "There's a third option," Tom said, still reading. "What's this about a public apology?" Jessica's professional smile took on a slight edge. "Mr. Chen is willing to consider a significantly reduced settlement if Mrs. Whitmore is prepared to make a full public acknowledgement of her behavior, including a formal apology to his nephew." "Public how?" Karen asked. A written statement to be shared with all residents of the Maplewood subdivision, acknowledgement of the property ownership facts, and a personal apology to the Chen family for the harassment they've endured. Jessica paused. In exchange, Mr. Chen would reduce the damages to $15,000 and allow Mrs. Whitmore to lease the land at $1,200 per month for the first year. Karen sank into her hallway chair, the papers scattered around her, like fallen leaves. $15,000 was still more than she had in savings, and $1,200 a month would stretch her budget to the breaking point. What if I just remove everything and walk away? She asked. That's certainly an option, Jessica said, but you'd still be liable for the commercial use damages, which would be calculated at the full rate. We estimate that at about $38,000 plus legal fees and interest. Tom whistled low. Karen, this man has you in checkmate no matter which way you move. There's one more thing, Jessica added almost casually. Mr. Chen wanted me to let you know that Mrs. Patterson has been asking questions about her design consultation. Karen's blood turned to ice. What kind of questions? Apparently, she's wondering whether her contract is still valid, given that the consultation took place on property that Mrs. Whitmore doesn't actually own. Jessica's tone remained neutral, but the implications were devastating. She's also asking about liability issues, since she paid for services related to property use that may have been irregular. The dominoes were still falling. If Mrs. Patterson started questioning the validity of their contract, other clients would follow. Karen's entire business could collapse under a wave of refund demands and liability claims. How long do I have to decide? Karen asked. Jessica checked her watch. Mr. Chen was very specific about timing. You have until 5 p.m. today to choose one of the 3 options. After that, he'll proceed with full legal action and the settlement options will be withdrawn. That's less than 3 hours. It's the same amount of time you gave his nephew to stop crying after you screamed at him, Jessica replied, and for the first time, her professional facade slipped slightly. Mr. Chen wanted me to mention that specifically. Karen felt the walls closing in around her. Every escape route had been anticipated and blocked. Every alternative came with a price she couldn't afford. Marcus Chen had spent 3 years building the perfect trap, and she had walked into it with her eyes wide open. I need to see him, Karen said suddenly. I need to talk to Marcus directly. Jessica and Tom exchanged glances. Mrs. Whitmore, Tom said carefully. I'm not sure that's wise. I need to see him, Karen repeated, standing up with sudden determination. This is between him and me. If he wants an apology, if he wants acknowledgement, then he's going to get it face to face. Jessica hesitated. Mr. Chen is currently at the property, overseeing some additional surveying work. But I should warn you, he's not alone. What do you mean? He's with his family. His sister brought her children over to see what their uncle had been working on. Jessica's tone carried a warning. Including his 8-year-old nephew. The nephew. The little boy she'd screamed at. The child whose tears had apparently triggered this entire avalanche of consequences. Karen looked at herself in the hallway mirror again. She looked like a woman who'd lost everything and was about to lose more. But perhaps there was one last chance to salvage something from the wreckage. I'm going over there, she announced. Karen, Tom said urgently, as your attorney, I strongly advise against... As my attorney, you're fired, Karen said, surprising herself. The silence stretched across the empty pool deck like a taut wire ready to snap. Marcus stood perfectly still, his hand resting protectively on a survey stake, while his sister, a petite woman with kind eyes and worry lines around her mouth, kept her son close to her side. The little boy, no more than 8 years old with Marcus's dark hair and his mother's gentle features, watched Karen approach with the wariness of a child who had learned that some adults couldn't be trusted. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying no emotion at all, I wasn't expecting to see you again today. Karen stopped about 10 feet away, suddenly aware of how she must look, disheveled, desperate, a woman whose perfect world had crumbled in the span of 6 hours. The other Chen child, a girl who couldn't have been more than 5, peeked out from behind her mother's legs. "Marcus, Karen's voice caught in her throat. She'd rehearsed what she wanted to say during the 30-second walk from her back door, but now, faced with the family she'd terrorized, the words seemed inadequate. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" Marcus's sister stepped forward slightly, her protective instincts clearly activated. "Haven't you done enough?" Karen looked at the woman, this sister whose name she'd never bothered to learn despite living next door for 8 years, despite calling the police on her family gatherings, despite making her son cry. "You're Lisa," she said suddenly. "Your name is Lisa Chen Morrison." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "How do you—" "I made it my business to know," Karen admitted, shame coloring her voice. "When I filed noise complaints about your family barbecues, I made sure to get everyone's names. Your husband is David, your daughter is Emma, and your son—" She looked down at the boy who was now partially hidden behind his mother. "Your son is Tyler." Tyler Chen Morrison pressed closer to his mother, but his eyes remained fixed on Karen with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Tyler," Karen said, softly, crouching down to his eye level. "I owe you an apology." Marcus stepped forward. "Karen, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," Karen cut him off, her eyes still on the little boy. "Tyler, 3 weeks ago when your ball went into my yard, I yelled at you. I scared you. I made you cry." Her voice began to tremble. "And I want you to know that what I did was wrong. It was very, very wrong." Tyler looked up at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. When he looked back at Karen, his voice was barely a whisper. "Why were you so mean to me?" The question hit Karen like a physical blow. She'd expected anger, defiance, maybe even silence, but not this simple, innocent question that cut straight to the heart of everything. "Because," Karen said, "and for—" The first time in months, she told the absolute truth. "I was angry about other things, and I took that anger out on you." "That's not okay. It's never okay for a grown-up to yell at a child like that, especially when the child didn't do anything wrong." "But Uncle Marcus said you thought it was your yard," Tyler said, his 8-year-old logic trying to make sense of the adult world. Karen felt tears beginning to form. "I thought it was my yard, but I was wrong about that too. And even if it had been my yard, that wouldn't have made it okay to yell at you." She paused, looking directly into his young eyes. "You were just being a kid, playing with your ball. There was nothing wrong with what you did." Lisa's expression had softened slightly, but her hand remained on Tyler's shoulder. "Tyler, what do you think? Do you accept Mrs. Whitmore's apology?" The boy considered this with the seriousness that only children can bring to important matters. "Are you going to yell at me again?" "No," Karen said immediately. "I promise I will never yell at you again. In fact, if you want to play in this yard, which is actually your uncle's yard, you can play here anytime you want." Tyler looked around at the empty pool, the survey stakes, the construction equipment scattered across the landscape. "Can I help Uncle Marcus with his project?" For the first time since Karen had approached, Marcus smiled. "We'll see, buddy. Right now, Uncle Marcus needs to have a grown-up conversation with Mrs. Whitmore." Lisa gathered both children. "Come on, guys. Let's go see if Grandma Chen has any of those cookies left in the car." As the family walked away, Karen watched Tyler skip alongside his little sister, already seeming lighter without the weight of her anger hanging over him. When they were out of earshot, she turned back to Marcus. "Your mother is here too?" "My whole family is here," Marcus said simply. "They wanted to see the land that Grandpa David bought all those years ago. They wanted to understand why this place was so important to him." Karen looked around at the property with new eyes. "Tell me about your grandfather." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to decide whether she deserved to know. Finally, he walked over to an old oak tree at the far edge of the property and gestured for her to follow. "He bought this land in 1988 with his army savings," Marcus said, running his hand along the tree's bark. "He'd been stationed in Georgia for 2 years and fell in love with this area. Said he wanted to build a house here someday, maybe when he retired. But he never did. No, he got transferred to California, then overseas. Then my grandmother got sick, and they needed to stay close to the VA hospital in San Diego." Marcus's voice was soft with memory. "But he never sold this land. Every year he'd send me pictures of it. He'd drive by whenever he was in town visiting us. He called it his someday place." Karen felt a heaviness settling in her chest. "He died 3 years ago. Cancer. Same kind that got my grandmother 5 years earlier." Marcus touched the tree again. "At the funeral, he made me promise that I'd do something meaningful with this land, something that honored what he'd dreamed of." "And what did he dream of?" Marcus smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "A place where families could gather, where kids could play safely, where neighbors looked out for each other instead of looking for reasons to fight." He looked directly at Karen. "Not exactly what happened, was it?" Karen shook her head, unable to speak. "For 3 years," Marcus continued, "I watched you turn this neighborhood into a battleground. I watched you use the police as your personal army. I watched you drive away good people and make everyone else walk on eggshells around you." His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "And then you made my nephew cry, and I realized that my grandfather's dream was never going to happen as long as you were treating this place like your personal kingdom. So you decided to destroy me." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I decided to reclaim what was already mine and show you what consequences look like." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. Tyler and Emma playing in a different backyard, laughing as they ran through a sprinkler. "This is what this land is supposed to be for: joy, family, community." Karen stared at the photo, then looked around at the empty pool, the survey stakes, the remnants of everything she'd built. "What happens now?" "That depends entirely on you," Marcus said. "Jessica gave you 3 options. Have you made a decision?" Karen took a shaky breath. "I can't afford any of them, Marcus. The lease payments, the damages, the removal costs. I don't have that kind of money." "Then you should have thought about that before you decided to wage war against my family for 18 months. The words stung, but Karen knew she deserved them. "You're right. You're absolutely right." She looked back toward where his family had disappeared around the house. "Your nephew is a good kid. He is. And he didn't deserve what you put him through." "No, he didn't." Karen was quiet for a moment, then looked up at Marcus with something approaching hope. "What if I could find a 4th option?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "What if I sold my house?" The suggestion hung in the air between them. Marcus studied her face carefully. "You'd sell your house to pay for the damages you caused?" "I'd sell my house to make things right," Karen corrected. "The house is worth about $250,000. After I pay off the mortgage, I'd have maybe $60,000 left. That would cover your damages, the removal costs, and give me enough to start over somewhere else." "Start over doing what?" Karen laughed, but it wasn't bitter anymore. Just tired. "I have no idea. My business is probably finished after today. My reputation in this neighborhood is certainly finished." She looked around one more time. "Maybe it's time for a fresh start." Marcus was quiet for a long time, and Karen could almost see him weighing options, calculating possibilities. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "There's something else you could do." "What?" "Help me build what my grandfather really wanted." Karen blinked. "I don't understand." Marcus gestured toward the empty pool, the open land. the potential that lay beneath the conflict. Your interior design skills, your knowledge of this neighborhood, your connections. What if we used all of that for something positive instead of destructive? You want me to work with you? I want you to help me create a community space that brings people together instead of driving them apart. Marcus's eyes lit up with the vision. A playground for the kids, a community garden, maybe a small pavilion for neighborhood gatherings, something that honors what this land was meant to be. Karen stared at him in disbelief. After everything I've done to you, you want to work with me? I want you to have a chance to make amends through action, not just words, Marcus said simply. Tyler forgave you in about 30 seconds.